The night was quiet. Only the sound of wind moved through the broken trees. She walked slowly, her bare feet pressing into the cold earth. Her skin glowed faintly under the pale moonlight, marking her as different, marking her as one of the outcasts. Once, she had lived in a village with her own kind, a place filled with laughter, firelight, and voices. But those days were gone, gone because she was called weak, called useless, and thrown out like a shadow no one wanted. Now she lived by moving from place to place, never staying too long, never letting herself hope for safety. The forest was her shelter, the ruins her only company, and hunger her constant enemy. She searched for roots and berries during the day, and at night, she curled up under fallen roofs to keep warm. Every day was survival, and every night was silence. Still, even when she was tired, even when she was cold, her heart carried something heavier than hunger. It carried the weight of loneliness. When she lay on the ground and looked up at the stars, she wondered why she had been born this way. Why had she been given a heart that wanted to love, but a life that only gave rejection? She remembered how the elders had spoken the day they cast her out. "Your blood is weak, your spirit is broken. You will never bring life to our people," they said. The words burned inside her like fire, and no matter how far she walked, she could not escape them. Yet even in pain, she dreamed. She dreamed of a small fire, a simple meal, and voices around her. She dreamed of someone calling her name, not with anger, but with warmth. She dreamed of holding a child in her arms, though she had none of her own. And she dreamed of a family that would not send her away. But dreams were fragile things, and when morning came, she woke only to empty silence. The land around her was scarred with broken houses and abandoned fields. She had wandered far, too close to human settlements, and that was dangerous. Her people had always warned against humans, calling them wild, calling them enemies. But she had seen them from a distance, families together, children playing, men and women working side by side. It looked nothing like the curse her people spoke of. It looked like the one thing she had always wanted. That night, the wind carried a different sound. Not the howl of beasts, not the crack of branches, but a soft, trembling cry. The alien stopped, her ears tilting toward the sound. It was small, fragile, and filled with sadness. She followed it, step by step, careful and silent, until she reached the edge of a broken fence. There, sitting on the stone steps of an old house, was a little human girl. Her shoulders shook as she cried into her hands. Beside her lay a torn doll, its fabric face faded, its hair missing. The alien's heart tightened, because in the girl's small body, she saw her own reflection, loneliness. The girl whispered words between sobs, words the alien did not expect to understand. "My father needs a wife, and I need a mom." The alien froze. Her chest rose and fell, but she could not breathe. The words struck her like a blade, and yet like a light. All her life, she had been unwanted, cast aside, forgotten. And now here was a small human child, crying for the very thing the alien herself had always longed for. Family, love, belonging. She wanted to step closer, to reach out, but fear held her back. What if the child screamed? What if humans attacked? What if this was only a cruel trick of fate? She stayed in the shadows, her glowing skin hidden by the night. But her eyes did not leave the girl. For the first time in years, the alien felt something new inside her chest. Not only pain, not only longing, but the faint, trembling spark of hope. She whispered to herself, a voice so soft even the wind could barely hear it. "Is this my chance?" Her hands trembled, her heart raced. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She only knew one thing. Her life had been empty for too long. And perhaps, just perhaps, this crying child might be the beginning of something she had never dared believe in. A family. The alien outcast stood in the shadows, her glowing skin hidden by the night. She had followed the soft sound of crying, and now her eyes were fixed on the little human girl sitting alone on the steps of a broken house. The girl's small frame shook with every sob, her tiny hands holding tightly to a torn doll, as if it was her only friend in the world. The sight was strange and painful, because in the girl's loneliness, the alien saw her own reflection. For a long moment, she did nothing, just stood there, silent and frozen, torn between fear and the strange pull inside her chest. The girl wiped her eyes and whispered into the empty night. My father needs a wife, and I need a mom. Her voice cracked, soft but heavy with longing. The alien felt the words strike deep inside her like an arrow. Her breath caught, her hands trembled, her heart pounded in a way she had not felt in years. She had dreamed of family, of belonging, and here was a child who longed for the very same thing. The alien wanted to step forward, to comfort the child, but fear chained her feet. Humans were dangerous, her people had always said. If the girl screamed, others would come, and they would drive her away or worse. Yet the pain in the girl's voice was too heavy to ignore. She crouched lower behind the fence, her glowing eyes watching, her heart torn in two. The little girl hugged her doll tighter and spoke again, her words breaking with each tear. Mother left us, father works all day, but he is sad too. He doesn't laugh anymore. The alien's throat tightened. The story was simple, yet heavy. Loss was a language she understood well, and now she was hearing it through the trembling voice of a child. Her own loneliness met the girl's loneliness, and the silence between them felt alive, almost like a bridge. The alien whispered to herself, her voice so soft it was almost a prayer. Why do I feel this way? Why does her sorrow feel like mine? She pressed her hand against her chest, as if to calm the racing heart inside. For years, she had been unwanted, told she would never bring life, never bring meaning. But this child's words made her wonder if fate had brought her here for a reason. The girl finally lifted her head and looked toward the trees. Her tear-streaked face glistened under the pale moonlight. Her eyes, large and full of sadness, scanned the shadows as if she somehow knew she was not alone. The alien gasped and shrank back, but it was too late. The girl's gaze locked onto hers. For a breathless moment, the two of them just stared at one another. The alien expected fear. She expected the girl to scream and run. But instead, the girl's lips curved into the smallest, softest smile. You're not a monster, the girl whispered, her voice trembling but certain. You look different, but you feel kind, I can tell. The alien froze, her mind racing. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her own people. Her glowing skin, her strange eyes, her marked body, all of it had only brought rejection. But this small human child looked at her and saw something else, something better. Slowly, carefully, the alien stepped closer into the light. Her movements were cautious, every step heavy with fear that the moment would shatter. The girl did not move away. She simply clutched her doll tighter, her gaze steady. The alien knelt down, lowering herself so she would not tower over the fragile child. Her voice trembled as she spoke, words foreign on her tongue after years of silence. Why do you not fear me? The girl tilted her head, as if the answer was obvious. Because you listened, because you stayed, she said, her small voice stronger now. My father doesn't hear me cry at night, but you did. The alien's chest ached. Her eyes burned with feelings she thought she had lost. This child was showing her more kindness in one breath than her people had shown in years. For the first time in so long, the alien felt seen. Not as a curse, not as an outcast, but as something that mattered. Her trembling hand reached out slowly, though she stopped before touching the child. She was afraid that her touch would break the fragile bond that had formed in the dark. Yet even without contact, the air between them felt alive. The girl smiled wider, her tears finally slowing, and whispered again, Please don't go, I don't want to be alone. The alien's heart cracked open. She had lived years in silence, years of rejection, and now one small voice was asking her to stay. Her chest shook with emotion, her eyes filled with tears she had not allowed herself to cry. She realized then that her life was no longer only her own. For the first time, there was someone who needed her, and she could not turn away. The night around them grew colder, but between the alien and the child, a fragile warmth began to grow. Neither spoke again, but in the silence, an unspoken promise formed. The alien knew the path ahead would not be easy. The night was heavy with silence, but the bond between the alien and the child had begun to take shape. The alien knelt in the moonlight, her strange skin glowing softly, while the little girl clutched her torn doll. The two of them faced one another, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as two lonely souls drawn together by sorrow. For the first time in years, the alien did not feel invisible. And for the first time that night, the child no longer felt abandoned. The alien wanted to speak, but her voice was broken with fear. She had spent so long in silence that words felt heavy on her tongue. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "Why do you not fear me?" The child tilted her head, studying her with wide eyes, and then smiled softly. "Because you listened, because you stayed when no one else did," the girl said, her small voice steady. Those words cut through the alien's doubts like a blade of light. She lowered her gaze, her heart trembling, as if the child had spoken to a wound she had carried for years. The girl reached out a small hand, her fingers pale and delicate. The alien stared at it, frozen, afraid to take it, afraid to break the fragile trust between them. Her people had always said humans were cruel, that they would chase her away if she came too close. But this child was different. Her eyes were not filled with hatred, but with hope. The alien slowly lifted her trembling hand, stopping just short of touching the child's fingers. Her breath caught, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm she could not control. Then, with the gentlest courage she had ever known, she let her hand rest against the child's. The warmth of that small hand burned through her like fire. It was not the fire of rejection, but of connection, of belonging. The child smiled wider, her tears finally drying, and whispered, "See, you are not a monster." The alien's eyes widened, her lips parting as if she had forgotten how to breathe. Those words, so simple, so soft, healed something deep inside her. For her whole life, she had been called weak, broken, useless. But this little girl looked at her and gave her a name she had never owned before, Mother. The alien's vision blurred with tears, but she did not pull away. Instead, she held on gently, afraid that if she let go, the moment would vanish like mist. The child leaned closer, her doll pressed against her chest, and whispered, "Will you stay with me?" The alien's heart shook. She wanted to say yes, she wanted to promise forever, but fear still lingered. Would the father allow her? Would the humans chase her away? Would this fragile bond be torn apart? Still, she could not bring herself to leave. Not now. Not after feeling what she had always longed for. The child seemed to sense her hesitation. "My father is strong, but he is lonely too," she said softly. "Maybe if he sees you, he will understand." The alien's eyes widened in alarm. Humans were dangerous. She remembered the warnings. She remembered how even her own people had rejected her. If her people had thrown her out, why would humans ever accept her? Yet the child's words wrapped around her heart, pulling her toward a possibility she had never dared imagine. The alien's voice shook as she answered, "Your father, he will not want me." The child shook her head, her small hands tightening around the alien's fingers. "You don't know. Maybe he just needs someone to help, someone to care." The alien stared into the girl's eyes, wide and bright with hope. Hope was dangerous, she knew. Hope could shatter and leave only pain. But in that moment, she found herself wanting to believe, if only for this child's sake. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of footsteps. The alien stiffened, her eyes darting toward the sound. A figure was approaching, carrying a dim lantern that glowed against the night. The child gasped and stood, her small hand still clinging to the alien's. "Father," she whispered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with urgency. The alien's chest tightened, her heart slamming like a drum. She tried to pull back, to hide, but the girl would not release her hand. The lantern light drew closer, and soon a tall man stepped into view. His face was tired, lined with grief, and his eyes narrowed sharply as they fell on the glowing figure kneeling beside his daughter. He froze, his jaw tightening, his hand gripping the handle of the lantern as if ready to strike. The alien lowered her head, already expecting rejection, already bracing for the moment she would be chased away again. But before he could speak, before his fear could rise into anger, the little girl cried out, "Father, don't hurt her, please. She's not a monster. She listened to me when no one else did." The father's expression shifted, confusion flickering in his eyes as he looked from his daughter to the alien. The alien dared not move, dared not breathe, but her hand remained locked in the girl's. The silence between them was sharp, alive, carrying the weight of choice. The child's plea hung in the air like a fragile thread, one that could either bind them together or snap apart forever. The man stood frozen in the pale glow of his lantern, his tired eyes locked on the figure beside his daughter. Her skin shimmered faintly, her strange eyes glowed, and every part of her appearance screamed danger to him. His grip tightened on the lantern handle, his body tense, ready to strike if needed. For years, he had heard stories of strange beings wandering the edges of villages, stories of creatures who brought curses, hunger, and ruin. Now one of them was kneeling in front of his child, holding her small hand. Fear burned in his chest, but behind that fear was anger. Anger at the idea that something so alien could stand so close to what he held most dear. "Step away from her," he growled, his voice sharp and heavy with warning. The alien outcast lowered her head, shame and fear flooding through her body. She knew this moment would come, the moment she would be rejected once more. Her instinct screamed at her to flee into the night, to disappear before his rage turned violent. But the little girl's hand held hers tightly, refusing to let go. "Father, wait," the girl cried out, her small body stepping in front of the alien. "She's not a monster. She's kind. She listened when I was alone." The father's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking between his daughter and the glowing stranger. "You don't know what she is," he snapped. "She could hurt you. She could hurt us both." The girl shook her head fiercely, her cheeks streaked with dried tears. "No, Father, she didn't hurt me. She stayed with me when you were gone. She cared." The words pierced the silence, trembling with innocence and desperate hope. The alien lifted her gaze slightly, her glowing eyes shimmering with fear and longing. She wanted to speak, to explain, but her voice felt trapped in her throat. The weight of the man's suspicion pressed down on her like a storm. Still, she forced herself to whisper, "I mean no harm." Her voice cracked, quiet and fragile, but it carried a truth that could not be hidden. The father's frown deepened, his heart torn between instinct and the plea of his only child. He had lost his wife years ago, and the wound still ached like a shadow that never left. He had worked hard to keep his daughter safe, to protect her from hunger and loneliness. But hearing her speak now, hearing her beg for this stranger, he felt the depth of her emptiness. She needed more than food, more than shelter. She needed a mother. Still, suspicion was stronger than hope. He took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the alien. "Why are you here? Why near my child?" The alien trembled, her words stumbling as they left her lips. "I heard her cries. I could not turn away." Her honesty hung in the air, simple and raw. The girl squeezed her hand tighter, looking at her father with pleading eyes. "She's not bad, Father. I prayed for a mom, and she came." The father's chest tightened, his hands shaking slightly at his daughter's words. Prayers, he thought. Prayers answered by an outcast, by something he did not even understand. He wanted to deny it, to push the creature away, but when he looked into the alien's eyes, he saw something unexpected. Not hunger, not malice, but the same loneliness he carried inside himself. The same pain he tried to hide from his daughter each night when she asked why mother never came back. The silence stretched long and heavy, the alien ready to be struck down or cast away. But instead, the father lowered his lantern slowly, the sharpness in his expression softening just enough. "You will not stay near her without my word," he said, his voice firm. "If you mean what you say, if you truly mean no harm, then you will prove it." The alien bowed her head, her voice trembling. "I will." The girl's face brightened with hope, pulling the alien's hand toward her father as if binding them together. The father turned sharply, his back to them, but his words carried through the dark. "You may shelter in the barn tonight, nothing more." The alien's chest tightened, her heart pounding with fear and relief mixed together. It was not acceptance, but it was not rejection either. For an outcast who had known nothing but exile, even a single night of shelter felt like a fragile gift. The little girl clapped her hands softly, her eyes shining with joy. "See, Father, she will stay with us." The alien's lips trembled, but no sound came, only tears she fought to hold back. Her body felt heavy with exhaustion, yet lighter than it had in years. She followed quietly as the father led the way, the child skipping beside her, still clutching her hand. The barn waited in the distance, old and cold, but tonight it was more than just shelter. It was a doorway to something she had never dared to dream of. The barn creaked as the heavy wooden doors closed behind her. The alien stood in the shadows, her glowing skin faint under the moonlight that slipped through the cracks of the roof. It smelled of hay, old wood, and animals that no longer lived there. It was not warm, it was not safe, but to her it felt different. It felt like the edge of something she had never been allowed to touch before. A home. She lowered herself onto the straw, her body tired from years of wandering. The father's words echoed in her mind, sharp and heavy. You will prove yourself. His eyes had been hard, his suspicion strong, and she could not blame him. Why should he trust her, when even her own people had not? She pulled her knees to her chest, her heart twisting with fear. What if this was only pity? What if by morning she would be sent away, chased like before? Her mind fought with itself. Stay and risk rejection, or leave before the door shut forever. She pressed her hand against her chest, whispering into the silence, "Do I belong here?" The question hung in the air with no answer, only the sound of the wind outside. Her heart told her to run, but her soul begged her to stay. The door creaked open, and the little girl slipped inside, carrying a small bundle. She rushed toward the alien, her smile bright even in the dim light. "I brought you bread," she whispered, holding out a piece wrapped in cloth. "And a blanket, it gets cold here." The alien stared at her, trembling. No one had ever brought her gifts. No one had ever cared if she froze or starved. Her hands shook as she reached for the bread, her voice breaking. "Why? Why do you give this to me?" The girl tilted her head as if the answer was simple. "Because you're my friend, and because I asked for a mother," she said, her voice soft but full of certainty. The alien's chest ached, her eyes burning with tears she had not allowed to fall. A child who had lost so much still had the power to give. She wrapped the blanket around herself, the rough fabric scratching her skin, but the warmth inside her came from something far greater than cloth. It came from belonging, even if fragile, even if only for this night. The girl sat beside her, placing the torn doll on the straw between them. "Do you like her?" the child asked, her eyes wide. The alien touched the doll carefully, as if it were a treasure, and nodded. The girl smiled, her voice lowering into a whisper. "Please don't leave us. I prayed for a mom. And you came. That means you're supposed to stay." The alien's hands tightened around the doll, her heart trembling. She wanted to believe. She wanted to say yes, but fear still chained her tongue. "Your father, he does not trust me," she whispered, her voice heavy with doubt. The girl leaned against her arm, her small body warm and fragile. "He will. He just needs time. But if you leave, he'll never see what I see." The alien stared at the cracks in the barn wall, the pale moonlight spilling through like silver threads. Could she risk it? Could she stay and hope that this fragile dream would not shatter? She had lived her whole life being told she was unwanted, but this child's words were breaking through that prison. For a long time, they sat together in silence, the girl slowly drifting to sleep against her side. The alien looked down at the small head resting on her, and something inside her shifted. She had no child of her own, yet in this moment, it felt as if she did. The bond was unspoken, but it was stronger than any chain she had ever known. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time she did not fight them. She let them fall, one by one, onto the straw. She whispered into the night, a vow no one else could hear. "If I am allowed to stay, I will protect her. I will protect them both, even if it costs me my life." Her heart burned with a strength she had thought she did not have. It was not the strength her people demanded, not the strength of war or power. It was the strength of love, the kind that gave meaning to survival. The barn felt less empty now, less cold. For the first time, she was not only surviving, she was living. But deep inside, fear still lingered, fear that morning would take this fragile piece away. She closed her eyes, listening to the soft breathing of the child beside her. And she knew that no matter what came next, she could not go back to the life of an outcast. She had found something worth fighting for, and she would not let it slip away. The morning sun rose pale and cold, spilling light across the fields. The alien sat quietly in the barn, her arms wrapped around the sleeping child who had curled up beside her during the night. For the first time in years, she had not felt alone. Her heart was fragile but warm, a small flame she feared could be snuffed out with a single breath. The barn door creaked open, and the father stepped inside, his face stern, his eyes scanning the sight of his daughter leaning against the alien. For a moment, his jaw tightened, suspicion flashing in his eyes, but the child stirred awake and smiled. She stayed. Father, she stayed with me all night. The man said nothing, his silence heavy, but he turned and walked away without a word, leaving the door slightly open. It was not trust, but it was not rejection either. The alien's chest tightened, her doubts swirling. Would she be allowed to stay, or was this only the calm before the storm? Her question was answered sooner than she expected. By midday, the sound of angry voices echoed from the village road. The father stepped out of the house, his face darkening as he saw the small crowd approaching. Villagers, men and women with hard faces, carrying sticks, tools, and makeshift weapons. They moved with purpose, their voices sharp and filled with fear. "We know what you're hiding," one man shouted. "We saw the glow in your barn last night." Another woman spat on the ground. "You've brought a curse to us. You shelter a creature that should be driven out." The father raised his hand, trying to calm them, but their anger was stronger than his voice. Inside the barn, the alien froze, her body trembling. Her glowing skin that had once been a symbol of shame now felt like a mark that could get her killed. The child clung to her arm, eyes wide with fear. "They'll hurt you," the girl whispered. "Don't go out there." The alien's heart ached, but she knew she could not hide forever. The barn door was thrown open, and harsh light flooded inside. The villagers stood at the threshold, their eyes filled with hatred. "There she is," one shouted. "The outcast, the beast." The alien lowered her gaze, ready for rejection, ready to be cast away once more. She did not fight. She did not beg. She simply stood still, her hands trembling at her sides. Perhaps this was her fate, to always be unwanted, to always walk alone. But before the villagers could rush forward, a small voice cut through the air like a blade. "No," the child cried, stepping in front of the alien, her arms spread wide. "She is not a monster. She is my mother. If you take her away, then you take me too." The crowd fell silent, their anger faltering as they stared at the little girl. Her small body shook, but her voice carried more strength than all their shouting. The father pushed through the crowd, his face pale with shock at his daughter's defiance. He looked at her, then at the alien standing behind her, and something in his eyes shifted. The villagers shouted again, demanding he choose. "Send her away. She will bring ruin. Protect your daughter, drive it out." But the man did not move. The alien's heart pounded, her throat tight with fear. She had never been defended before, never been wanted enough for someone to stand at her side. And now this small child was risking everything for her. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "Why? Why do you fight for me?" The girl looked up, her eyes full of certainty. "Because you are my family now." The words struck harder than any weapon. The alien's knees weakened, her chest burned, her heart no longer felt like it was hers alone. She was bound now, not by blood, but by love. The villagers grew restless, their anger rising again, but the father raised his hand at last, his voice cutting through the noise. "Enough," he said, his tone deep and commanding. "This creature has done no harm, and if my daughter calls her mother, then she stays." The crowd murmured, their fury not gone but shaken. Some lowered their weapons, others grumbled with distrust, but none dared strike, while the father stood firm. The alien stood in stunned silence, unable to believe what she had heard. She was not cast out, not yet, not here. For the first time in her life, someone had spoken for her, defended her, chosen her. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the child still clinging to her hand. The girl smiled up at her, as if she had always known this moment would come. The alien whispered softly, her voice trembling but alive. "Family." The barn stood silent after the shouting faded. The villagers lingered in uneasy silence, their anger now weakened, their doubts heavy in the air. They had come to cast the alien out, but what they found was a child standing bravely before them, refusing to let go of the one she now called mother. And behind the child stood her father, no longer silent, no longer uncertain, but firm as stone. The man raised his voice once more, his words clear and strong. "This outcast has harmed no one. She brought no curse, she only brought comfort to my daughter, and if my child calls her mother, then she is family here." The villagers shifted uncomfortably, muttering to one another. Some still glared with suspicion, but none dared step forward against his will. For they had known this man as strong, as stubborn, and now his choice was set in stone. The alien outcast stood frozen, her glowing skin trembling in the light, her heart struggling to believe the words she had just heard. Family, she thought. Family was the dream she had carried in secret all her life. And now, here it was, offered to her not as pity, but as truth. Her knees buckled, and tears she had held for years fell freely at last. She lowered her head, whispering through her tears, "I do not deserve this." The little girl rushed into her arms, hugging her tightly. "You do. You do," the child said with certainty. "You were meant to come. You were meant to be here with us." The alien held the girl close, her hands trembling as if she feared she would vanish at any moment. She felt warmth, real warmth, not from the blanket or the fire, but from being wanted, from being loved. Her heart, once empty, now beat with purpose. The father stepped closer, his eyes still cautious but no longer filled with suspicion. He looked at the alien, then at his daughter wrapped in her arms. "You will stay," he said firmly. "But know this, if you stay as family, you share our life, you protect her as I do." The alien raised her gaze, her tears glistening, and she nodded. "With all I am," she whispered. "I will protect her. I will protect you both, even if it costs me my life." The villagers slowly dispersed, some shaking their heads, others glancing back with unease. But none returned to strike. None dared challenge the bond they had witnessed. By nightfall, the fields were quiet again, the house lit with a small fire, and the barn no longer felt like a prison of exile. It felt like a doorway to something new. Inside, the alien sat near the fire for the first time, the girl curled up against her side, smiling in her sleep. The father sat across from them, watching silently, still unsure, but deep inside a small part of him softened. He had lost a wife, but perhaps fate had given him something different, not to replace what was gone, but to heal what remained. And when he looked at his daughter's peaceful face, he knew the choice had been right. The alien closed her eyes, the warmth of the fire and the weight of the child in her arms filling her with peace. She was no longer the outcast wandering alone through ruins and forests. She was no longer the cursed one who carried only rejection. She was mother, she was family, she was home. Her tears fell silently as she whispered to herself, words only the fire and the stars could hear. "No one will take this from me. No one will take her from me. I will fight. I will stay. I will love." And as the night stretched quiet and long, the alien's heart finally rested. For she had found what she thought she never would. Not survival, not pity, but the one thing she had always searched for. A family at last.